Oh my goodness, it's our first rodeo trying to figure out stuff again. Hey, wait, am I supposed to? Sorry. So every one of us is having all kinds of technical difficulties here this morning or this afternoon. I don't even know what time of the day it is. So welcome back, everybody, to TEAMTIM. Let's see, does this one work or does this one work or does that one work? I don't know. We'll figure it out along the way. Oh, you know what? It's definitely not that one. It's this one. All right, I think. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of We Have No Idea What We're Doing, TEAMTIM.com. We're really glad to have our good friend David here today. Mr. Schnurr, why don't you take a second, introduce yourself, and we'll go around the room here.
Yeah, no, a little bit of a circus here getting back to the round circles, huh? Getting online, getting our podcast going here, but great to be back. Tim, Jesse, and David, our guest today. A little bit of a gong show getting on here, but excited to talk about winners and losers. In terms of, I guess, cybersecurity, but we can talk about anything. There's a lot of exciting vendor products and strategies that are happening outside of cybersecurity as well. So, particularly focused on the channel. So. I'm Tim Schnurr. I have a firm here in the tri-state area, which is Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey, specifically focused on data privacy. I also do a lot of cyber awareness trainings around the area as well. So, but excited to talk to David, and get his thoughts. Tim, you're up, or we can move around the circle here.
I'm going to go and so Tim, always good to see you. How's that house coming along? You finally get that thing fixed up or something? I know you kind of spent the last.
I had the 1970s green. I was like, got to get ready for tomorrow.
Yeah, nice.
Finally slapped some paint on there. Hey, Jesse, how are you, my friend?
Hey, everybody. Yeah, glad to be back. I think this is our first time back since IT Nation. Is that right? So yeah, be a good show to talk about what we're seeing from the floor there, and obviously excited to hear the feedback from everybody else. I'm Jesse Miller with Power PSA Consulting and founder and creator of the PowerGrid vCISO system. So what we do is we help MSPs scale their vCISO programs in a profitable manner. And I'm excited again today to talk about, I will probably steer the conversation towards cyber just a little bit, but I think Tim's right that there are some other interesting developments happening in the channel. So interested to get into the discussion today.
Yeah. And, IT Nation, we'll get into that here in a little bit. So actually, we'll get into that. So I will give David an opportunity. David, welcome aboard. Kind of free flow. Feel free to introduce yourself, say all the high things. Yeah. Welcome aboard.
No, appreciate the time, everyone. David Pirtle. I currently serving as VP of Sales for Bellini Capital, working with Arnie, but that primarily takes form of working with Tim and Maureen over at Compliance Scorecard, and then Peter and Shrikant at Connect Secure. Been in the channel a little over 10 years at this point. I did 10.5 years with ConnectWise. In a variety of roles there. So very excited to join you and talk about, again, what we saw at IT Nation Connect, what we're seeing in the industry, the space at large, cybersecurity specifically. So thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. Jesse, I forgot to do this when you were up and give you your plug. Trying here. We're just all in shambles. And of course, you, Mr. Tim, as you were doing your thing, I have these banners. At least I got David's up, but I suppose I ought to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening as well. So, hey, everybody, Team Tim, founder and CEO of Compliance Scorecard, where we help your MSP have the risk conversation with your customers. Excited to be back here again with Team Tim. I know we've kind of been on again, off again, all kinds of technical difficulties, but hey, we're at least here the week before Thanksgiving. And man, do we all have a lot to be thankful for this year. But without further ado, let's just dive right into it. So today's topic, what are the winners and losers in cybersecurity strategies and tools? Jesse, you brought up IT Nation. It's the most recent conference that we were all at here, just a week or two ago. David, I know you were there. I was there. I'm going to be a little anecdotal for a second, but I'm going to have Jesse chime in on his experience. I was actually like there as an attendee. And let me tell you, it was quite a great experience not having to be on, not having to be always worried about what booth I need to be at, what thing I need to do, what vendor I need to deal with. Like, it was nice to just be able to like be me. Not that I'm not me, but it was really great to just be able to attend some sessions, hear what, MSPs are getting, put out in these conference sessions. Heck, I even sat by the pool for 2.5 hours and did absolutely nothing. Shh, don't tell my team. But it was really great to not feel like I had to be on so much all the time as a vendor and actually participate. One of the big key takeaways that I really liked this year was how they changed the venue hall. They put the ConnectWise booth at the back, changed the layout, made a little more space between the booths, and I actually felt like I could walk booth by booth and have some conversations with people and not feel cramped and whatnot. So anyways, Jesse, how was your experience?
Yeah, mine was great. Mine was, I had to be on, so to speak, right? But I think I structured it in a way that was fun for myself. I like building, I like helping, and I like problem solving. So I basically just kind of put up the bat signal and said, I'm going to be there. If you're an MSP and you want to talk about strategy for 2025 for your VC, so in risk programs, schedule a meeting. And so filled up most of my time doing that. Had some amazing conversations. It's always, and I get energy out of that kind of stuff, right? So that was super fun. Busy time, but I really enjoyed it. And so, my initial takeaway is that, and this because I worked the compliance scorecard booth with you last year, right? And there was probably, I would say, double the amount of GRC tools at IT Nation out there. So we had, I think they were like back to back to back to back. We had Blacksmith to Synomi to Invito, and then I think there was one other one right in that, and like they were literally stacked right next to each other, right? It's like GRC aisle. So that was interesting for me to see, and I think we're going to see more of that, right? I'm seeing a lot more talk about governance. NIST has been driving that, right? So we can get into that, and I'll let you guys weigh in. But that was my initial takeaway. I was kind of like, that's really interesting. We're starting to see some competition, which I think is good there.
Yeah, the market. Well, I'm not going to talk about compliance and compliance scorecard. That's what we're not here for. But David, you have been part of ConnectWise for what, 7 or 8 million years or something like that? I've lost track now.
Close. Yeah, there was pterodactyls flying around when I joined there, I think.
Exactly. So talk a little bit about, your previous experience actually working at ConnectWise. And now you were there with our good friends and sister company, Connect Secure. Probably a completely different perspective this time.
Yeah, it's a little different perspective on the other side of the curtain, but it was very positive. Having been there for so long, it's interesting to see, what an alumni group, has come out of ConnectWise. You walk around the show floor and half or more of the booths there have somebody that I'd worked with in the past. So a lot of good talent, a lot of great people that have come through there and are now influencing the channel in a variety of different ways, mostly positive. So I was very grateful to connect with partners, former colleagues, get to meet some of my current colleagues who are remote. I thought it was a very positive week. I think there's a lot to be excited for in the space heading into 2025. A lot of great sharing of ideas and planning for the new year. A lot of great emerging technologies that were getting recognized through the Pitch It program and other venues there. So I came away from the show very energized and ready to have a great close to the year and then launch into 2025 with some momentum. I think that's everyone's goal, right?
That's awesome. Yeah. And, it's always interesting. ConnectWise is probably one of the largest ones that I've been to in a while. It has a different feel when it's, a few thousand people as opposed to a few hundred people. And, sometimes I think, at least for me personally, like I need the time out, right? I just need to go and, like I said earlier, Yeah, just go and sit by the pool for an hour or two and like turn my brain off. Um, and I wonder, Tim, you've been to a bunch of different, different conferences, not specific MSP ones. You were just at one, what, a couple weeks ago, right? I'm assuming it was a little smaller than IT Nation. You want to talk briefly about that particular show?
Yeah, I've actually been to 3 or 4, channel conferences, specifically in the New York City area. And, I think a lot remains the same, but also, it's interesting. Jesse mentioned that GRC angle where compliance seems to be of interest. Tim and I talk about this quite often. PAX8 kind of threw their weight behind somebody last summer. I won't name them, but it came in and out, right? So I still think compliance is certainly blue ocean and certainly really difficult. I think we're kind of impressed with Tim, and we won't talk specific names here, even neon lights in the background, but it's so that's one thing. And I don't want to blow this too much into a rabbit hole, but every single conference I've gone to, all 5, they were different topics, but all just AI. Like just the AI vendors have come out of the woodwork. Like I can solve this MSP problem with a small language model or whatnot. So it was really interesting to go to all these different events. And then I posted last week, I was at a really kind of high level conference in New York City, which had chief scientists from Microsoft, like, data science lead at Qualcomm. So like really big hitters, MIT and Stanford professors. And just to get their take, put it this way, it's a little bit different than the channel take. So, they're not making predictions on where things are going. And I think the vendors, these AI vendors are like, we're going to change the world. Like everything's going to be different. And, I think there's a little bit, we're not there yet, right? Like in terms of MSPs integrating AI. So don't want to go, right. AI fatigue. I'm feeling it. That's a great comment. So, Tim, I wanted to take that. What are the other kind of emerging or declining things you're seeing? Jesse kind of mentioned GRC vendors lining up. And first of all, like I'm really bummed to missed IT Nation. I've gone I think 3 or 4 years in a row here, but Universal Studios, the concerts, the whole 9 yards seems like it was a blast. And you guys are probably still tired, though.
Well, I didn't do any of the. I never left the property. Let's put it that way. David, did you have an opportunity to do any of those things, or the fun things, or the golfings, or the outings, or any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we had some fun while we were there. We attended the block party and Universal and all that good stuff. So it was exciting to get out a little after, and it makes for a late night, which makes for an extra early morning. But I feel like that's where a lot, I've been to between Automation Nations and IT Nation Secures and whatever it's been over the years, probably 18 or 20. And I feel like that's where the best conversations happen is, after the sessions are done, you get some food, you get maybe a drink or two, and that's where I feel like the real relationships and the real connections happen. So yeah, it might mean you're a little bleary-eyed in the morning during the keynote, or maybe you didn't make the keynote. We won't tell anyone. But that's where the real good stuff happens in this channel.
David, did you have an opportunity to kind of walk the floor at all and kind of see anything that kind of struck out as far as emerging or cyber strategies or tools or, oh my gosh, I've never heard of this kind of thing before?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a few. I feel like some things that used to be nice to haves are quickly becoming need to haves. Definitely a focus on the cloud, cloud and SaaS backups, cloud security, compliance management. Obviously a big announcement from the Dattocon event was the formal purchase of SaaS alerts. You see the enforcers of the world coming out where bringing a 365 management component to our tool as well. So I think really securing the cloud as that next emerging threat vector. And also I think I was really impressed with Breach Secure now. I think they did really good with the theme that they brought, and I know they did very well on their lead volume. It's good to see an MSP focused cybersecurity awareness training tool taking front and center stage in the market and competing well. So I think a lot of those proactive measures, a lot of those left of boom type of tools that were maybe nice to haves in the past, you're starting to see those become more and more a requirement in the core MSP stack, which I think is promising for our market.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I think that, you know, we talk about AI and, like, of course that's dominating the news cycle, so to speak, most days. But it's like you got to eat your vegetables, right? We've talked about that before, and that things like that have almost been glossed over, that have really been transformational and have grown in terms of technology in the last 2 or 3 years, is like our automation, RPA. Like, there's so few MSPs talking about that, but there's really some great tools and some great strides have been made in terms of, you know, Roost and other vendors. And those are things that are necessary, but they're not as sexy as AI, for example. But to Tim, to your point, and before I move on to that, David, I was just kind of dovetailing on what you're saying, is that exactly right. The left of boom stuff, it's not as glamorous. It's not as cool as, you know, all the new hot detection and all that kind of stuff. But really, left of boom is what moves the needle from an MSP's perspective and their client's perspective in terms of creating resilient organizations. So again, it's those types of things. You mentioned something, they're becoming a requirement. So that's market driven, right? That's not something that we're just deciding. So I think that's important to think about. To the AI piece, it's funny because I had a conversation about this yesterday, Tim Schnurr, to your point about that nobody really wants to make any predictions. I was talking with a CTO who does advisory for a bunch of larger MSPs, really smart guy. And he was talking about how, you know, his approach is when he's making, because of how he's advising his customers, he's like, I need to know in great detail everything that a technology does before I can position it the right way and kind of push the organization that way. He's like, so I've really made it my mission in the last 6 months to learn everything I can about AI. And he said, I feel like the more I learn, the more I realize that none of us really know what it's capable of at the end of the day. And he's like, so it's really almost frightening in a way, because we're just it's doing these things, but we're not exactly sure how to contain or control or what the next evolution is going to look like, because we almost can't control it or we don't know. And so I thought that was extremely interesting for someone of this mental capacity to say. So interesting conversation around that.
Yeah, and Robert Chiaffi, right? I think he's like really focused on AI, speaking about it, and there's a lot of our favorite names, right? And it's the same comment that Microsoft chief data scientist made, say like its strength is in the messiness, is what she said. So it's like, and it's the strength is in the unexpected, right? Like it gives you things that you didn't expect. So I think it'll be really difficult to implement that. But just circling back to what David said on left of boom, what do you think is the catalyst, or like why do you think MSPs, do you think it's cyber insurance, or like what's kind of pushing them to figure out, like, I get a lot more, potentially ROI, I guess, but it's kind of phantom, right? Like you're like, oh, I'm helping you protect yourself, as opposed to coming in and putting a fire out. So
yeah, I think it's a couple things. I mean, I think one, it just naturally follows the evolution of the MSP model from the start. I mean, they started fixing things when they were broke, and eventually realized, well, we can make a lot more money by preventing things from breaking and focusing on uptime metrics and access metrics. And the best MSPs, you don't have to call them because you don't even know they're there because everything's working. I think the same thing follows on the cybersecurity front naturally. I think minimizing risk, as we see a lot of private equity money and consolidation happening in the space, risk to an investment is is dangerous. It's almost more important to minimize risk than to maximize growth in some of those worlds. So I think you see this risk mitigation, risk minimization as a component of that investment coming to fruition. And then I think at the end of it all, a lot of MSPs are figuring out this is a great way to make money. It's a great business outcome. You can go after more unobtainable customers where you have less competition because most MSPs aren't going to want to take on the added compliance rigors. You can charge more higher average per user and per seat costs because you're providing additional layers of service. So I think as you look at the competition in the space evolving outside that standard MSP stack and competing on different fronts where you can make good income and have good business outcomes, at the end of the day, that's the core driver.
David for the win. Jesse always talks about business outcomes, right? As do we. But you make a really good point there about emerging tech, where it's heading, how MSPs can kind of differentiate themselves, utilizing tech as a catalyst. As we start to think about like continuing on just this conference theme for another probably 5 or 6 minutes, what are some keys to success of being a channel vendor, right? Or being like in that quarter, we've been having this massive Slack conversation about metrics and KPIs and scanning badges and not scanning and all this kind of stuff. But, David, you've been in the channel for a while, certainly a lot longer than all of us. What do you think are some of those keys of being successful in the channel as it comes to conferences and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, conferences are a tricky one. I was looking at a consolidated 2025 list of industry events. It was just pages long. I mean, I think MSPs are getting a little bit of conference fatigue. I think vendors are getting a little bit of conference fatigue. And I think there's a paradigm shift where, we're looking at alternatives outside of the big box industry events, doing things that are local, regional, small group, high touch, white glove, getting smaller, more targeted audiences together where you're not competing with 200 other vendors on the floor. It is really, I think, a key strategy to get your message to your your core target accounts. I don't think the show strategy is ever going to go away, but you start to say like, hey, maybe I go silver instead of platinum. Maybe I go gold instead of diamond. Where is my best return on investment for the dollars that I'm spending? Because these shows are, they're not free. They're not cheap. You got to pay to play a little bit. But I think there's a lot of those questions being asked about that strategy for 2025. As far as the other keys, to being a good vendor, I think the more you can align your sales strategy, your go-to-market strategy, your pricing models with how MSPs are going to market and pricing packages and their model, the more successful you can ultimately be, and the more you can be a partner to them instead of a vendor.
Love that. I love that. Jesse, you have a little bit of a experience as a vendor. So this time, without getting into details around all the IT Nation stuff, because we kind of beat that horse, but going into that conference as a vendor, what were some of the key outcomes, the business outcomes that you as a VCSO, as providing services, did you have keys to success? Did you meet those goals? What did that look like? Did you plan for all of that?
Yeah, so I think it's a simpler strategy, to be frank, because I'm working as a coach / consultant to MSPs in a lot of ways, right? So my strategy is more about quality over quantity. So to the point of having a booth and scanning badges, and how much I talk about focusing in and niching down on your ICP. I eat my own dog food, right? I don't say that and then not do it myself. So I have a very specific type of clientele I want to work with and that are going to be successful building a VCSO program, right? So I want to talk to those and give them value. So strategically, I'm trying to have quality interactions. And yeah, that's exactly right. I'm not going to get that with booth scans and, shouting in somebody's ear at a block party after the fact. Right. And not to say that the block parties aren't fun, right? But I'm saying I'm not going to those looking to try and use it as a business enabler, right? So I think from a metric perspective, that's, I think what David said resonated, is like focusing on, maybe we're seeing people talking about dropping their sponsorship levels and working to have cohorts or user groups that are parallel or ancillary to the conference, and kind of drive to those more and focus in on those. I think that's right. And I think that's what we're seeing, a shift that way. So being able to leverage your skills for maximum effect is a good strategy there.
Love that. So
I
Tim,
wanted to ask that question. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask it for you, right? So you've had, I know I interrupt. I'm really good at this. David, you learned that about me. I interrupt too much. So Tim, you worked in enterprise, right? Deloitte and all the big six. You worked in enterprise. You came in the MSP space. You understand channel. Like this whole conversation, like channel versus enterprise, going to conferences that are MSP channel focused as an enterprise org. Like, talk a little bit about, because you've been in both of those worlds now, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'd love David's thoughts as well, but I'll start. They're very different, right? I'm fairly new to the channel, but I've seen kind of companies do really well, right? Some of our friends like John Harden, some of our friends that have, been acquired, have really figured it out, have really been able to, David mentioned peer groups, which I think is really critical, right? Like, you're a partner and you're not a customer, and that's a little different, right? So you're bringing something that can facilitate their business and hopefully create value. And I've seen companies do really well. I've seen some enterprise companies come into the channel, and I'm sure you guys can chime in on that, and totally fail. I make a joke, right? Like Silicon Valley, the show, Jin Yang has like, there's the enterprise cyber provider, and then there's like the channel version of it, right? Like the China version. It's like there's this completely different ecosystem, like shadow, value provider of vendors, and I think the peer groups are great. I'm actually experimenting in the market a little bit, being kind of like an implementation provider. So you think about a lot of vendors, they try to do it all, right? Like they try to sell directly to the MSP and they try to do all the service. But if you look at the big four, you look at Salesforce and CrowdStrike and Splunk, like there's always the big four kind of like in between the company, the enterprise company and the vendor. And they're helping implement, tune, teach, train, and really make it like a successful story. And you don't really see a lot of these like integration kind of third parties out there. So it's a little bit of an experiment. I've got some vendors that I'm working with and some clients actually in the tri-state area, just because they're really kind of difficult things, right? It's not like firewall or MFA where you just turn it on and it works, right? IAM, like it has to work. Even IAM has a lot of configuration, but yeah, those are some of the big things. Tim and I talk about a lot about peer groups, about co-selling and co-delivering, right? Like you teach the MSP how to value pitch your tool, right? And then you have to go actually deliver alongside them as well. So it's a really challenging space. I don't want to talk too much, but the other thing is MSPs, like if they're giving you a chance, there's an opportunity cost that they're not out selling hours, consulting, doing something. And most of the time when you sell to enterprise, InfoSec's got like hours to burn. So they'll just try a bunch of tools and they'll do a bake off and like they'll pick one. But that's just not the case in the channel, right? They're not going to try every single GRC vendor and be like, yeah, I like, so-and-so the best. So, yeah.
David, did Connect, I don't know, maybe they did ConnectWise sell to non-MSPs? I probably should know that answer, and maybe not something you probably need to talk about, but maybe more just focusing on the channel aspect of understanding the nuances between channel and enterprise, or if you have experience around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always
Did I
the
put you on the
risk of
spot?
no, I mean, there's always the risk of a conflict of interest. I think as much as you put guardrails up, I think any MSP vendor out there, they may not market to enterprise or mid-market. They may not proactively search out that business, but if someone emails in from a bank or a local government or XYZ and raises their hand, do you have the courage of your convictions to walk away from that dollar? I'll leave that up to every vendor to make their own decision there. I think you should ask, are you using an MSP currently? If you are, can we run this business through them? I think there's ways to minimize that potential channel conflict. But everyone's trying to acquire customers and logos and build enterprise value. So I think I know for a fact there are true channel only vendors out there. And we applaud them. They've developed a tool for a specific space. They're committed to that space. I think from a tools perspective, there's so many different requirements between an enterprise and an MSP focused tool. We don't tend to see a lot of overlap. Maybe if you get up at the very highest level, maybe there's a few where, a ConnectWise PSA would be competing against a ServiceNow or something of the like. But, there's a few or far between. We're trying to be in our space. And I think you've seen from the attempts that the Ciscos and Microsofts of the world have made to come down into the channel. It's not always easy either. So for now, I think there's enough differentiation, enough speciation between the tools that we can each be happy in our own little ponds.
I love that. Yeah. Obviously, David, that we are only channel focused, but I always love the transparency in saying I do have 2 non-MSP customers, because I get the question a lot. Our sales team gets the question a lot. Are you channel? Are you going to go after my what the MSP is actually asking, in my opinion, in that underlying question is, are you going to go after my customer? And the answer is always no. Right. And I think that's the biggest differentiator, at least when I say we are channel only. If Bob's Lugnut comes to us and says, we want to use our platform, I'm going to push them to an MSP, ask them, like you said, David, the MSP question. But then again, do you turn down work, right? So there's always that balance. We always try to make sure that we're bringing the MSP into the forefront. Jesse, you going to add something?
I was just going to say, I've worked on both sides, being a CISO and an MSP for many, many years. I've been on the wrong side of those promises enough times to when I'm told we don't compete and we have measures in place. I'm like, okay, put it in writing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, if that happens, you will turn the revenue over to me, right? Oh no, we can't do that. Well, then it's not really, you're not committed to it in my perspective then. So
exactly. Yeah. So there was another
right, like there's call it name give up, right? Like I sell these 5 guys and no one else, right? Like, and as Jesse, you said, like if you can put it in writing, even better. So sorry, Tim.
No, I was just agreeing with you. I was going to say, so, we're coming into that 20-minute mark left here. We always want to make sure that we leave time at the end for takeaways. Tim, you brought something up in chat earlier, and we were kind of texting and having conversations this morning around CompTIA. I don't know if we want to take a moment or two and kind of dive into this whole what's up with CompTIA and whatnot. I'm going to keep my perspective to the end and kind of let the three of you kind of play around with the CompTIA conversation, or do we even want to go there?
Get the pitchforks out. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we doesn't know. I'll try to do it like a summary of it, right? So, CompTIA, the exams and testing kind of area, is spun off into a for-profit. And the organization is going to have to change its name into something else. But the good part is they're going to be funded, it sounds like almost in perpetuity. So well-funded, things like Trustmark, things like SP 911, right? All the good things. And I don't know if the kind of the channel if the cohort is being where that's falling. Is it in the for-profit or nonprofit? Tim may know better, but it's an interesting deal. I don't think we can compare it to anything, I've seen kind of in other industries, in law and finance. So sorry.
Hey, you're supposed to silence your cell phone. I need to put the big movie banner up in the beginning.
Yeah. But Tim, do you know if the cohort, I guess some of those cohorts, right? Like, or is that really, ConnectWise, I guess, is driving those and not necessarily. But it's an interesting thing, right? So like if you have a CompTIA cybersecurity certificate, now it's a different entity, right, that you're paying dues to, and it's for profit. So I'm a little torn. I think it's a good thing. Tim, I know you have an opinion, and it's not adverse. So go ahead.
No, I would allow David or Jesse to chime in and kind of make.
I'm firmly in wait and see mode. I don't have a bunch of like energy about it, to be frank. Sounds like a business deal, and there's probably some benefits for both parties, or they wouldn't have done it. And I think you will see that, yes, the tests for costs and certification are going to go up. But frankly, I think you're going to see the rigor for the testing go up because it's a for-profit. And so there's going to be better controls around that. So I don't know. I mean, I was a CCNP at one point, and I learned a ton and have held high regard for the Cisco certification process, which is an extremely for-profit endeavor, right? But it was one of the hardest tests, and one of the tests that I knew if somebody got those certifications, they knew what they were doing. So I don't have a bunch of energy. We'll kind of wait and see, and I think it's going to play out that way.
David?
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, I think at the end of the day, we'll look back and this ends up being pretty good for the industry. I think the real secret sauce of what makes CompTIA special has been maintained. I think it's a lesson for all of us there. The old adage, a lie circles the earth 5 times before the truth leaves the front door. And even more so in this social media driven world that we live in, I think the missteps there, I think, were with the announcement and how it was rolled out and how it was initially presented to the space that left ambiguity for some of these misconceptions to roam a little bit. So controlling the narrative, making sure all your I's are dotted, T's are crossed before you do these kinds of announcements. I think a lesson for all of us here in the space.
Absolutely. So that's excuse me. That's where I was gonna kind of start off was. All right, the first news that dropped, I'm just gonna say it was a shit show. And fine, as David was saying, like making sure that the messaging that you're putting out on, regardless of what's happening, has words that MSPs can understand. Not that they're stupid, but when you use the word sovereignty, like red lights go off, right? And when you use words like in perpetuity, red lights go off, right? And so I think we can all agree, like the first announcement, not so good. The second one, a little better. The third one, okay, now I got it. And there was a lot of confusion in those first couple of hours, first couple of days. I mean, text messages, whatever, all the things. But at the end of the day, I use this analogy like when this came out, right? So you have Barnes and Noble. They sell books. They're a for-profit. They make money. But you can go sit there as a book club and talk about the books, right? You can hang out. You can have community. You can spend time together talking about the book that you just bought from that entity. I look at it like that. So they sold off the bookstore. Who cares? Let them go sell their amazing books and do the things and probably do it better. And now we can still have book club. Instead of sitting in Barnes and Noble, we can sit around, Jesse with his dog behind him and hang out and pet the dog and talk about the book, right? I looked at it like, I think this is a good thing. When you have these kind of mixed business models and you have a revenue generating center trying to support the non-revenue generating center, things get squirrely, right? Jesse, you talk about this a lot, and I'm sure you have this similar strategy, David. Like, where are those dollars going, right? If I'm all one big organization and I have this bucket thing making money and this not making money, where am I going to spend those dollars? I'm going to spend it more on the making money division, which lets the non-making money divisions suffer. And so now, and I don't know all the details, I don't really care to know all the details, breaking them apart and allowing that community-driven organization, the space for MSPs, the ISOs, the training, the market research, all that great stuff that we've all come to know and love over the past 10 or so years at CompTIA. They don't have to worry about money. They don't have to worry about begging for dollars from the board anymore, because they're going to be set up, quote, quote, in perpetuity. And then the dollar, the certifications, there's not going to be devalued. They may actually get better. They may actually be more now that they don't have to worry about, we have to give 20% of our budget over here, and being able to separate them apart. In my opinion, I think it's a really great thing for the MSP community and for the individuals and organizations seeking those certifications in the long run. Yeah, it's going to be bumpy. It's always bumpy, but I think it'll be a really good thing going forward. And I'm off my soapbox.
Yeah, I mean, one last thing. I think the people that aren't as familiar, who know the name CompTIA but aren't like fully involved with it, there's just confusion, obviously, as a consumer, I'll call it, of like what happened to the old CompTIA, right? So, and Tim, you talked about the money generating business, but CompTIA, we I think most people on the channel love CompTIA for all the good things they do. So, it might not make money, but it's certainly created a very, very good brand.
Well, and that's not going away. In fact, that may actually be able to get better now that they don't have to worry about income.
Yeah, but there will be a name change. The brand is going with the for profit.
The brand is going for profit, which is a little bit of a struggle, but that's all right. You know what? We'll come up with a better name. Look at me. How many times have I rebranded in the last 18 to 24 months? I
will say I don't like the name of the new CASP test. So if that's any indication of the brand name.
Yeah. So we're coming down to the last. Go ahead, Jesse. I kept you off.
No, I was just going to say, what is it? Security X, I think, is what the new test is called.
Yeah, Security X. Wait, is everything just going to be X? Sorry, too soon. Too soon.
Oh yeah, well that's another good thing. The non-for-profit. At least they won't be sued by Elon. That's another good piece of it.
Yeah. So Ray popped up a really great question. It's been the last probably 8 or 10 minutes on Gartner recovery, talking about cyber recovery as one of the most initiatives. I want to first can we just take a 30-second? What do they mean by cyber recovery? Jesse or David, you want to kind of chime in on what do you think they mean by that?
I don't know what that is.
Well, I'll tell you anecdotally that I see a lot of incident response plans, right? And almost universally, the most neglected part of the continuum is the recovery stage, right? Like, here's how we'll detect an incident. Here's how we classify an incident. Here's how we respond. And oh, by the way, yeah, we'll do some recovery. It's like a paragraph dedicated to it, right? So I think I see cyber recovery as kind of the entire continuum of incident response planning, preparation, and then dedicated systems and plans for how we recover the business when an incident does happen.
David, do you have any different take?
Right, a boom or what? Go ahead, David.
Yeah. Well, it's both, really. It spans it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the better practitioners in the industry understand that no matter how many layers of defense you put in place, you're only reducing risk. Risk is never zero. Attacks can always and likely will still happen. So you have to have a fail safe. You have to have something to fall back, even if you have the most advanced stack in the world and you're doing end user training and you have this and that and 2FA and every widget known to man. You're only reducing and limiting risk and exposure. You're not removing it. So being able to get a business back up and running and functional in the event that something does go boom, I think it's your final fail safe as an MSP, and you should be charging appropriately for the service that you're offering.
Yeah, I'll give you a good kind of 2-bit definition of the difference between disaster recovery and cyber recovery tools, right? So your disaster recovery is like your Veeam solution, your backups or your data or whatever that is, right? That's your backing up and you're able to restore in case of an oopsie, so to speak, right? Cyber recovery solution is making sure that those backups are unchanged. You know, you perform the CIA piece to it, is that they're unchanged and that they're actually protected from being erased by the attacker. It's interesting. I was talking to a startup. They're still in stealth mode right now, I think, who has a solution for this, where they take your backups and then they move them to a air-gapped solution. They stage them so you can take them and ship them off into the cloud. But then once they get there, they move them into an air-gapped solution for cyber recovery. So, you know, if the backups are completely destroyed, you still have a viable backup that you can get to, right? So actually, I'm just going to say this quickly. If anyone's interested in looking at that, give me a shout and I can connect you with that person. I don't get paid for it. I just think it's interesting. And I think MSPs should be thinking about it. So,
you know, I might take it a step further. I love that we're talking disaster recovery. We're talking incident response, you know, BDCR, business continuity. There's a component of cyber recovery that I don't think any of us talk about, and that's reputational recovery. That's, you know, financial recovery. That's mental health recovery, right? There's backups and getting the business up and running, but there's a whole other side of recovery that we all need a 12-step program for or something. Like, there's a whole big component that I don't think anybody actually ever talks about. And who knows, maybe that's my next go-to-market business. But there's a spot of it that, like, I don't think we talk about the health and well-being and the recovery of that. The reputational recovery. Like, are there reputation services? Yes, but there's a whole different side that I think we're all missing. We talk about the tech. We don't talk about the people, the finances, and the business as a whole, at least in my opinion. All right. New feather in the cap for me to go build something new in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So we're coming down to the last 7 minutes. We always like to end this with some key takeaways for our MSP listening audience. And Ray, thanks for your great comments along the way, as well as Alexander and a few others that are in chat. Thank you so much. Does somebody want to go first on their key takeaway?
Yeah, I can hop up there.
All right, hold on. Let's do this.
All right. Yeah, so I think my key takeaway is that, you know, GRC is here to stay. Clients are beginning to ask for governance and risk services. And as David mentioned, you know, if you're positioning yourself as the MSP, you're able to move upstream to better and more lucrative clientele and create differentiators for higher margins and better revenue.
Awesome. Thanks, Jesse. Now, if only there was an MSP channel-focused GRC. No, I'm kidding. I'm just saying. Tim or David, y'all have a key takeaway, my friends?
Yeah, I mean, I can go. I think that it's getting interesting, right? Like, so from the channel perspective, you had to be turnkey. You had to be easy to sell and easy to deliver. And I think that's changing quickly, right? Like, GRC is something far from turnkey, and it's interesting to see some of these tools really come on and be, you know, taking a bigger focus. It goes alongside, you know, what Jesse does, right? vCISO and GRC are very, very intertwined. So that, you know, that's the big takeaway. And I think I mentioned AI before, and that's just, I think it's just noisy right now, but we'll see where we are in a year from now. So
awesome. Oh, I'm gonna make sure I'm clicking the right button. Nope, not that one. This one. What about you, my friend David?
Yeah, I think my takeaway is naturally it's this time of year where everyone's looking at 2025 and starting to do their planning, if not well into it. And if you're not well into it, you might wanna start taking a look, looking at what your goals are for the next year, building a plan to get there, looking at the marketing spend, the trade show spend, however you're going to support your goals. But I would encourage everyone to just, instead of looking how much you can grow your existing services, pick 2 or 3 core initiatives, whether that's GRC, whether that's implementing AI into your business, whether that's, adopting an RPA platform and starting to drive profitability through automation, whatever some added functional areas that you can focus on, pick a couple, commit to them, build them into your 2025 plan. And hopefully you'll find some added revenue streams that help you get to your goals.
That's awesome. Yeah, all right, I'm just gonna say it. AI for me, not the way of the future. We hear, I want to circle back to IT Nation. I saw way more vendors there with AI on their boards. We talked about this in the very beginning. I'm terrified of it in a sense. Like, not that I don't use it. It's been really helpful to take my disjointed thoughts and, make sense out of them. But when I start to think about using them in everyday use of tools, technologies, and business process, I start to get a little freaked out, especially when they tell me about go eat a pound of rocks a day. So the hallucinations are getting better. But as far as like cyber strategies and tools going forward, y'all plugged the GRC, so I feel like I can't say that again. There's a component of, and I think I'm going to just go back to what David asked. What Ray asked, which is the cyber recovery component. There are a lot of DR planning tools. There are a lot of backup planning tools. There aren't really a lot of great full cycle incident response planning things. Right? You have an IRP, you have a document, but actually having a SaaS or having a program, or having a tool to facilitate that all the way through and not miss the individual components within an IRP and the KPIs that go along with it, all those fun things. I think there's a big opportunity for operationalizing incident response planning, at least going forward.
Tim, it would be fun to do a Bob Miller game using a well-written incident response plan, right? I think a lot of times they do that game with that, kind of on the fly. So let's
I agree. It's something I've chatted with Bob on and off. And if you don't know, it's irgames.ai. Bob's got a great little thing. He does them every Friday or every other Friday. I don't remember, but go check out Bob Miller's incident response game that he has. I think it's a great step in the right direction. But all right, so 2 weeks from now, December 6th. Let me share this. Tim, you want to talk about what's coming up in 2 weeks?
Yeah, 2 weeks from now, Brian Blakely, our esteemed CISO, thought we should really dive in on third-party vendor due diligence, right? Like doing a vendor due diligence assessment. So this is going to be good. Brian's got a lot of experience, and as do the rest of us, Jesse and Tim here as well. So excited to do that. I don't think anyone's really doing it well, right? You could always do better.
Totally agree. Yeah, we have shied away from VDD because, in my opinion, there's no standard, so we don't like. Yeah, but I am excited to kind of get Jesse and Brian's take coming up next week.
Well,
2 weeks.
Just a prequel to that, I will say that I think, to David's point, there is a ton of opportunity there because of how difficult it is for MSPs. So if MSPs move that difficulty for their customers, we talk about moving upstream to larger accounts. That's a great entry point. So we'll talk about that more in 2 weeks.
It is. All right. Any parting words, anybody, before I kick us all out here in 35 seconds?
Enjoy your turkey.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, everybody, or whatever it is that you may or may not celebrate in this coming week. David, thank you so much for coming on. Always a pleasure to have you. And,
thank you so
we'll see
much.
you all in 2 weeks. Let me figure out how to end this stupid thing. Here we go. All right, everybody. Hopefully it will play the outro. So, bye.
Subscribe now.